Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You know who I am. You are my student. I am going to be discussing today documents 5, aka document E, and document 6, document aka F. So these are the last two that I gave you to complete for the assignment. I know last time I tried to make provide a little hope in your, the stuff going on. There's no hiding from it. It's in the news. This is not something that we should avoid. We should try to look at it from different points of view. I thought I might try to lighten the mood a little bit because it's, we hear so many negative reports about this and negative reports about that, and I'm hoping that I'm going to hear some really positive reports from you and from your parents about all the good that you've done. But for now, I think we should come up with the motto for this whole virus that we should have as our kind of way to think about it. So just a little bit of humor in this more than difficult time. Can't touch this. Don't touch that. No, don't touch the face. No touching the face, folks. Wash the hands. Oh yeah. Washing the hands. I know you can't see my feet, but my feet are doing all kinds of break dancing. So that's enough for that right now. I know you enjoyed it as much as I did. Sorry about that. We had a little technical difficulty. I just wanted to point out one of you, my lovely cherubs, said that I was weird. It was nice, but weird, I think they put it as. I would say to that student, you had me last year and most of this year, and you just figured out that I'm weird? I was diagnosed weird 3,500 years ago at least. And those of you who are my students know exactly what I mean by that. All right, so let's get on with our subject at hand, because it is very important for us to cover this. I know there's been some questions, and where do I get the information? I'm going to repeat, once again, all the information for these questions over here on the right of the screen, my right now, your right now, are all from this document. They are all from this document. They could be in this part where it talks about the source. They could be in the box section, but the information is all there. You just got to look with it with your eyes and find it. You got to look for the details. As Mrs. Sire would say, read for detail, folks. Read for detail. All right, this is document 6. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I know you guys want to finish already. This is, by the way, what was that? That's right. Ready to get. You guys are so smart. This is the best subject, social studies. It is the best subject. I hope you all enjoyed the video, by the way. I thought I was maybe a little super dressed, as the saying goes. Let's talk about document 5, aka document E. So, this is a description. This is what we would call a primary source. We know it's a primary source. I forgot my Yoda stick. That's why I feel, there it is. It doesn't feel right. And here, ladies and gentlemen, once again, is my Yoda stick. Yes, just once. Remember, it's a small little stick that Yoda used. Yes, maybe I did know Yoda. I am from the future and the past. So, having said that, a source is an excerpt of a historical text written by Priscus, the Roman ambassador to the Huns. There's those Huns again. Around the time of 449 CE, or you may know it as AD. Remember, Anno Domini means in the year of our Lord, not in after death. I want to keep that in mind, those of you who unfamiliar with it, make sure you know that. Why is this important? Because it's a primary source. We know it's a primary source because it's written by this ambassador. Priscus is reporting a conversation he had with a former Roman citizen whose land had been conquered by the Huns. So the ambassador talked to somebody he had a relationship, obviously, before the Huns had invaded. He, considering his new life better than his old life among the Romans, and the reasons he gave were as follows. So he's starting off this conversation that he's having with the former Roman. He's saying, my life's better now. And here's why. The condition of Roman subjects, there's that word subjects again. We'll get back to that. In time of peace is worse than war. Taxes are very severe, and unprincipled men inflict injuries on others. A wealthy lawbreaker is not punished for his injustice, while a poor man undergoes the legal penalty. The climax of misery is to have to pay in order to obtain justice. He said that the laws and constitution of the Romans were fair, but deplored that the governors, not possessing the spirit of former generations, were ruining the state. I have to tell you, this chunk here is filled with so much data. There's a lot of information for us to digest there, and several warnings as a country. Because, first off, we're not subjects. We're citizens, right? Said it before, I'll say it again. My bias is this is the greatest country in the history of the world. This is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest country there's ever been. I have no doubt about that. I'll gladly defend that against anybody. But I'll say this. One of the reasons for that is that we are citizens and not subjects of an emperor. Remember, I think it was yesterday's discussion where we talked about the difference between being a republic and an empire. Under an empire, you were beholden to the emperor, and under the republic, you were beholden to the state and matters of like the tribunes and the Senate and other parts of the government. But you had more say as underneath the republic than you did. It wasn't much say. Let's be honest. It was not a megaphone style or a huge amount of difference, but there was a difference between living under the emperor and living under the republic. But this is just out and out saying we were subjects. We were, submitting to the emperor. Not cool. All right. And in times of peace is worse than war. Taxes are very severe. Taxes again. The taxes were so high. And unprincipled men inflict injuries on others. This, first of all, before I go into the second half, I want to sum up this first half. Considered his new life better, and the conditions were, there's no difference between being at peace or being at war. It stunk the same. That's what he's saying. See, the difference is what you're not probably picking up is that during wartime, you make sacrifices. Many of us today, have characterized what's going on now as a war. We're fighting a war against an invisible enemy. And so we as a people make a sacrifice. The sacrifice may be to stay at home. The sacrifice may be for all those who are working in the hospitals and helping and caring for those who are sick or getting sick. There's those sacrifices. In a more traditional war, during World War II, for example, people would salvage every piece of metal they could find. They would save every penny. They would donate it by war bonds to help pay for the war effort. They would work extra shifts in the factories so that they can make more bombs or bullets or planes. Those are the sacrifices that you would expect during a wartime. And more importantly, the taxes would be so high. The taxes would be high enough to pay for the war effort. and government services might be less because everything was focused on winning the war. Because if you don't win the war, you don't have a country anymore. This guy is saying whether we were at war or whether we were at peace, it was the same bad times. The same sacrifices had to be made. And that makes people unhappy. As it did with this gentleman that the ambassador is talking to. He says it makes no difference. Important key concept. Now, this next one we've actually had conversations about in different subjects and at different times. When we talk about the inequalities of justice, the wealthy lawbreaker is not punished for his injustice, while a poor man undergoes a legal penalty. In other words, you can buy your way out of doing something wrong. You can buy your way, before we learned that in one of the previous documents, to connect a previous document, you can look it up, you can buy your way out of being conscripted to serve in the military. You can buy your way out of committing a crime. You can be declared innocent instead of saying you have committed a crime. Whereas if you didn't have the money and you didn't have the means, you had no choice but to either serve in the military for the conscription part from, I think it was document A, or document B, or you had to, if you committed a crime, it didn't matter. You were poor, you were going to jail. You're a criminal because you can't buy your way out like the wealthier people. That inequality is something that is also based on one main concept which Rome never dealt with, which was slavery. Rome had slavery. It was a different kind of slavery than what we had in our country at its founding. The slavery back in the ancient Roman times was still brutal and bad. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it wasn't based on race. It was based off of, you lost the war, you and your family and everybody in your country are now a slave, and we're going to sell you as slaves. Whereas what we had in early American history was based off of your skin color and where you came from. So I want to keep that concept that slavery is a major problem. The United States dealt with slavery. We fought a war. 500,000 Americans died in fighting that war to free the slaves. We dealt with that issue. So there could be, and then we put in place three amendments to our Constitution to ensure equality under the law for all races and for all people. And so we have that put in place. The Romans never did that. The Romans never had that. The Romans created an empire. When they had their civil war, they came out of it with an empire that never dealt with the issue of slavery, which, by the way, was something I'm sure was on Caesar's list of things to take care of. And not because he was altruistic, but he wanted to make sure there would be a Rome later on. I digress. Let's continue on this. The climax of misery is to have to pay in order to obtain justice. He said that laws and constitution of the Romans were fair, but deplored that the governors, not possessing the spirit of former generations, were ruining the state. From here to here is a great warning to us as a country. This is something that you should be aware of. This is going to be your country at some point. You're going to be growing up. One thing you cannot defeat, no matter how much you try, unless you have a time machine. One thing, seriously though, one thing you can't defeat is time. You're going to grow older. In a few years, you're going to be 15, 16. Eventually, you're going to be considered an adult. You're going to be signing up for the selective service. You'll be eligible to carry a rifle in combat. And you'll also be eligible to vote. You will have no choice but to grow up. And this will be your country to have these decisions being made. And one of the things that you need to be sure of is pay attention to this lesson. We'll still have the same Constitution. The Constitution is still going to be there. You're going to have the same paperwork. But what happens is when we go further and further away from it, what happened to the ancient Romans is the further they got away from that, the less it mattered to people. And the less it mattered meant that bad people, bad actors could come into power and do bad things and get away with it. It specifically points out governors not possessing the spirit of former generations were ruining the state. Now, first of all, we know that the former generations, we've talked about them. People like Caesar were not perfect. People like Pompey were not perfect. People like Cato and Cicero and all the rest of the gang were not perfect. But what they possessed is Rome was the government, and they had a duty to the government to follow the law. What this is suggesting is the later generations didn't feel a need to. So that's something for you to be worried about, because that can allow bad actors to come in and do bad things. That's important. It's been a long time on that one, didn't I? It's a very important one, though. It's key. It's key because not only does it talk about, at least I got to tell you, there's got to be at least 3 things you can pull from that for your essay. 3 things you can pull from your essay. I hope you got them. Okay, if not, read over it again. I bet you can come up with at least 2. Let's go on to document F. Document F. Now, starting again at the top, the Edward Gibbons. Gibbons is one of these historians that set a standard. He set the standard for Roman history. Just a side note, he's the guy who wrote it says it right here actually. The history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. He's the benchmark. He's the standard that everyone wants to be, because it took him 12 years to write it. I think it was like 6 volumes, 3 volumes. Not tiny ones, significant ones. 6 volumes, I stand corrected. And this is written in 1776. I hope that date sounds familiar. And set between 1776 and 1788. It's not a primary source. It's a really good secondary source, though. We'll say it's a secondary source, but we'll throw in there really good secondary source. Let me grab some diet green tea. Before I read Gibbon, let me read this down here. Peter Stearns, Michael Hayes, and Stuart Schwartz. This is from the year 2000. Clearly a secondary source. If you guessed primary, you were wrong. But it is a secondary source. And so now let's read. In the second year of the reign of Valens, 366 CE, the Roman world was shaken by a violent and destructive earthquake. The shores of the Mediterranean were left dry by the sudden retreat of the sea, but the tide soon returned with the weight of an immense flood, which was severely felt on the coast of Sicily, Greece, and Egypt. 50,000 persons had lost their lives in the flood in the city of Alexandria alone, which is in Egypt. This calamity astonished and terrified subjects of Rome, and their fearful vanity was disposed to see a connection between the symptoms of a declining empire and a sinking world. Now, first of all, Alexandria is named after Alexander the Great. So just a little side note there. I like to mention those side notes when they pop up in our readings. But here, the connection is between a declining empire and a sinking world. They don't mean that this isn't Atlantis, folks. Things aren't sinking. They're not going down. We're not having a sinking ship. They're talking about a world in which things are collapsing. Things are going bad. A declining empire, and it just keeps on getting worse and worse and worse. Going on to the Stearns section. More important, in initiating the process of decline was a series of plagues that swept over the empire, which brought disease from southern Asia to new areas like the Mediterranean, where no resistance had been established even to contagions such as the measles. The resulting diseases decimated the population. The population of Rome decreased from 1 million people to 250,000 people. Economic life worsened in consequence. Recruitment of troops became more difficult, so that the empire was increasingly reduced to hiring Germanic soldiers to guard its frontiers. The need to pay troops added to the demands on the state's budgets, just as a declining production cut into tax revenues. That section is probably very connecting to you right now. 3/4 of the population of the city of Rome was wiped out in the space of a short time because of a disease that would be an ancient version of a pandemic because it came from Asia, over 2 continents away, had to go through all of Asia, through Africa, and then into Europe. This is a pretty big deal. This is a pretty big deal. These two are talking about people don't have a scientific reason. This is back before the idea of germs. We didn't have the idea of germs. We knew of certain diseases, like certain things that could cause, happen, that could cause you to die. But we had no idea of those tiny little things like we do today when we talk about germs. When we talk about the virus, we understand it as a piece of RNA wrapped up in a pile of matter and grease and stuff like that. And we understand that. We understand. We can look at a cell and understand how a cell is broken down. You've learned that in science. Again, proving once again, a side note, why social studies is the best class. You're hearing about science, right? Back then, they didn't have that. Back then, it was like, oh, we got lots of rain. It must be because the gods are shining on us. Oh, it's a beautiful day. The God of the sun, he is looking down on us. Oh, we won the war. It must have been because the gods are, we got good, augurs or identifiers that we were going to have a good future. Even, you remember when we talked about every year when a Roman consul would be elected, they would have to do certain sacrifices, and the priest would read the intestines of certain animals to figure out whether it was going to be a good year or not. These are definitely not scientific methods, and it's no different when you come to making why was there an earthquake? Why was the water pushed away and it flooded back in? Why? It must have been because of the water god thought it was going to be bad, or it might have been because of some other reason. But when you get right down to it, they didn't have the science. You can't sit there and say, "Oh, how stupid of them." I want to caution you on making that judgment that people were dumb or dumber then than they are now. No, that doesn't make them dumb. That just makes them lack of knowledge. There's a lack of knowledge. That doesn't mean they're stupid. People have, our brains haven't changed that much in 2,000 years. Just like our motivations for things haven't changed too much. I've said it before. I'll say it again. We still have greed. We still have hate. We still have love. We still have jealousy. We still have the idea of humility, or even dignity. The idea of being somebody important, pride. All these things are still part of human existence, just like they were when the first human figured out how to rule an empire. Just like when they figured that out, or they built the first mud brick house. Same emotions run through us that ran through them. And our brains haven't changed that much to say that they're dumber than us. They just didn't have a great social studies person or history person writing down the information. The reason why you have that great plastic machine in front of you is because you stand on the shoulders of generations upon generations upon generations of human beings who have recorded the knowledge and passed it on and have learned from previous generations. Where did plastic come from? The stuff inside your Chromebook right now, or your computer that you're using to watch this, that stuff was, the techniques to use that in some cases are hundreds of years old. Even, some of that material is, we're processing and using copper, for example. Copper's been around for thousands of years. But yet it's an extremely important part of your computer. Because you wouldn't be able to get this information for most of us if the wire that brought the information, made of copper, was run to your house. A lot of the information that we have that comes to us through our computer is running over those copper lines. You don't see them because they're buried in the plastic and the wrapping and whatever else it may be that runs across the street and down the street and to your house. You don't see those. So you don't even think about it. But that took thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of human beings working on it. And all that material is built up over time. This is why I say when Rome fell, we really lost a lot. That's why it's important to keep society and civilization running, ladies and gentlemen. And I think I might be running out of my time. I don't have any music for you to go out on, but I will want you to think. I'll probably put puppies up for that. How about that? I'll put puppies up to make you laugh and smile. But I want you to remember, take care of yourselves. Have a good time. Remember, wash your hands. And don't touch this. You can't touch this right here. Because you touch this, you touch your mouth, you got something on your hands. Even if it's not corona or anything like that, it could be just buggies for something else. Who knows? Stuff that makes you feel sick to your stomach or make you want to pukey. You know, you don't want that, right? So make sure you take care of yourself and wash those hands. Wash, wash, wash. Get in between those fingers. You gotta get in between those fingers, folks. All right. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you're helping your parents. See you soon next time.